Good evening, everybody. Amitofo. I don't know who she was talking about.
大家晚上好，阿弥陀佛。不知道刚才果一法师在谈的人到底是谁
？But she asked me to talk about my favorite subject, me. So I'm going to tell you all about me.
所以果一法师今天请我讨论我最爱的话题，那就是我。所以我今晚就会跟大家讨论我的生平。
Yeah, so I was asked to tell something about my life and then about how the Abbey came about. So I never anticipated that when I was younger that I would be a Buddhist nun.
那法师今晚请我讨论一下我的生平，我生活的经验和而我如何会创立一个道场。那我小时候万万也没有想到我会出家。
Okay, I was born into a middle-class family. My grandparents were immigrants to America, so I just kind of had an average childhood, you know, kind parents.
所以我小时候是在一个中产阶级的家庭里生长，很平凡的一个度过一个很平凡的小时候就是平凡的家庭。那我的父母我的那个祖父祖母都是从欧洲移民到美国的。
But I grew up during the Vietnam War, and I also grew up during the civil rights movement in the U.S. when there were a lot of demonstrations and sometimes riots.
但是我在生长的时候是在美国打越战的时期，然后也美国的整个社区也有公民权的运动，所以是在那个阶段开始长大。
And so I thought, since I was young, what's the meaning of my life?
所以我从小就一直在那里探索，说我的生活的意义到底是什么。
And especially the government was telling us that we were killing people in Vietnam so that we could all live in peace. And I said, huh? That doesn't make any sense.
那时的政府跟我们说，我们在越南打战，在那里杀人，是为了要制造和平。那我心里想，这完全不符合逻辑。
And our Constitution said all men are created equal. Of course, they forgot half of the human population.
那美国的宪法
You know who I'm talking about, the other half? Okay. But so we were taught that. But then in our own country, not everybody was being treated equally. And that didn't make any sense to me either.
那美国的宪法里头说，所有的人是平等的，但是英文字那个人是只是指男人，所以当然我们就是看到整个人民的一半被漏掉了，所以法师看到这样就也是觉得说也是不符合现实。
Okay. So I got interested in religion. I was raised Jewish, which is a minority religion. They believe in one God, not Christianity. But that didn't work for me.
那法师小时候也是在犹太教生长，但是是独神论，对吗？对他来说也是不符合他的想法。
The idea that there was a creator who created this mess of our world, I thought, you know, in any business, somebody who created a mess would be fired. Yeah.
所以独神论说，有一个制造我们整个世界的一个神，对吗？但是为什么会把整个世界制造的这么糟蹋？那如果是经营生意的话，已经早就被辞掉了。
Yeah. So I had all these questions, and I had a Christian boyfriend, and so I, you know, went and saw the priest, and I talked to the rabbis, and none of what people said made any sense to me in terms of what's the purpose of my life and how did I get here to start with?
那我年轻的时候的男朋友也是天主教徒，那我也去找了那个天主教的那个牧师，问他不同的问题，法师也请了那个拉比问他问题，但是就是心里找不到他想要找到的答案。
Yeah, so when I went to university, I became kind of a nihilist, you know. I studied history, and one of the basic things I learned from that study was that in European history, almost every generation, people were killing each other in the name of God. And I thought, who needs religion if all we do is kill each other for it?
所以在大学的时候呢，我就开始变成一个虚无主义者。因为特别是在学历史上的时候，发现到在欧洲所有的宗教都是以在上帝的名义而去谋杀其他的人，开始打战，所以我就觉得宗教其实是没有帮到人的。
So it's a rather cynical view, which isn't particularly good, but that's where I was at.
那有这样的想法是蛮冷漠和自私的，但是那时候我在大学就是有这样的想法。
But I also grew up during the hippie era.
但是我长大的时候也是在嬉皮的那个时代。
So I had long hair down to here. I had just pierced my ears. Yeah, I won't tell you what else I did because I might shock you. But you can just imagine.
所以你们可以想象的，法师是嬉皮嘛，就是把头发留得很长，然后那时候也他刚穿的耳洞就穿了很大的耳环。那我不会跟你们说我其他的做的其他的事情，恐怕会把大家给吓到。
Yeah, I wasn't born a nun.
我不是出生而变成就是出家人了。
So after school, I went traveling around the world, and then I came back and I went for a teaching degree, and so I was working towards that at university, and then also teaching elementary school in the Los Angeles City schools.
那我毕业之后呢，就开始去得到教书的学位，然后之后就在洛杉矶的那个城市的学校开始教小学。
Okay, in our trip we had gone to India, Nepal, and I really loved it there.
那毕业过后，我也有去旅游。那旅游的时候就到印度跟尼泊尔，我非常喜欢这两个地方。
And there, in Kathmandu, there were some rice prints, Buddhist rice prints, and we bought some, and I thought, yeah, they're really cool. I'm going to put them, you know, on the wall of my flat, and then everybody would think I was really cool because I had been to India.
所以那时候我到了加德满都的时候，有买用米纸做的那些艺术画，那我就觉得我很了不起哦，买了可以放在我的那个公寓里面给大家看说，哦，我有去过尼泊尔。
So one summer vacation, which we had off, I saw a flyer in a bookstore, and it was about a retreat taught by two lamas, Tibetan teachers, outside of Los Angeles. And so since I wasn't working in the summer, I said, let's go.
所以在夏天暑假的时候，老师都有放假嘛，我就在一个一个书局的看到一个海报，那里就有说有藏系的喇嘛有开一个禅修营，那竟然我有暑假的时间，我就说啊，倒不如我去参加吧。
Okay, so there I went with my long, very brightly colored skirt and my peasant blouse embroidered and my long hair and my earrings. I walked into the meditation hall.
所以那时候去禅修营，我就是穿了一个很华丽的一个长裙啊，然后上面还是穿的被刺绣的那些乡下人穿的那个衣服，然后头发又留得好长，这样的装扮去禅修营。
Okay, and what did I see? I saw a man wearing a skirt and a woman with a shaved head.
那时在禅修营看得到是什么呢？就是有男众穿裙子，还有女人是剃头的，好奇怪。
So they said, the lamas are a little bit late. Let's meditate until they come. Well, that was great, but I knew nothing about meditation. I had seen in a magazine a picture of somebody like this, and it looked like their eyes were rolled back in their head. So I thought, well, I don't want to look out of it. So I sat there, and I went like this and rolled my eyes back.
所以那时候他们跟我们说，那个喇嘛迟到了，所以我们大家就在这里一起静坐。那问题是我不知道什么是静坐，所以我在杂志中有看到有人好像坐在那里把眼球这样卷到脑后，对吗？头后，我就这样学他们，坐在那里把手指这样放在那里，把那个眼球这样卷，就坐在那里这样等他们来。
Yeah, thank goodness they came quickly because it was giving me a headache.
幸亏他们很快就到了，不然我会头痛。
So then when the lamas first started speaking, one of the first things they said was, you don't have to believe anything we say. I thought, good.
所以那两位喇嘛到了呢，有一位就跟我们说，今晚我们所说的话，你完全都不要，你不需要去信我们所说的话。那我心里就说，太好了。
Okay. So they said, you're intelligent people. You think about it. If it helps you, apply. Well, first they said apply reason and logic. Think about it. If it makes sense, good. Practice. Meditate. Try it out. If it works, good. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't make any sense to you, leave it aside. And I thought, okay, that's good. Now I can listen.
他们说，你们是有智力的人，就由你们自己去用你们思考的能力，去用自己的逻辑去思考我们所说的话，不必去信任盲信，对吗？这样我就觉得太好了，我可以这么做。
But then when they started teaching, what they said made a lot of sense to me when I started reflecting on it.
他们也刚才有说到，就是你不相信的东西就把它搁在一旁就行了。那当我思维的时候，我就发现，其实他们所说的话非常的符合逻辑。
I didn't know anything about rebirth, but the way they explained it and the logical reasoning showing that rebirth existed, I said, that makes sense, yes.
那时候我都没有了解到投生的那个概念，但是当我听到他们教法的时候，用逻辑性的方式去解释到底什么是投生，我心里就觉得这是对的。
Okay. And when I tried the meditation, it also really helped. I stopped being so depressed.
那我自己试探怎么去不同的静坐的方式的时候，我也发现，这真的帮忙到我的心态，我没有那么忧郁了。
Okay. So after the course, I went back. I did some meditation and a retreat. And then I thought, I've always had a feeling that I don't want to die with regret. And I thought, this is really interesting to me. If I don't follow it, I will regret it later. And so the lamas were teaching another course at their monastery in Nepal. So I quit my job, packed my suitcase, and went to Asia again.
所以我在参加了这个禅修营之后，我回家了，还是继续有静坐，然后也有参加另外一个禅修营， 然后久而久之就觉得这真的对我生活非常有益。那当我发现到那些喇嘛在尼泊尔再次有开一个禅修营的时候，我就决定把我的工作给辞掉，那就搬到尼泊尔去学佛法。
So until now, I've left out a little detail, which was I was married.
所以到现在我还没跟大家说一个小小的问题，那就是我那时候还是有结婚。
And so the lamas went to a course. I mean, my husband went to a course taught by the lamas in another part of the country. And when I said I want to go back to Asia, he wasn't happy, but he went along.
所以那时我的丈夫也在美国跟那些喇嘛有学佛法，但是是在美国的另外一个部分。那当他听到我要回去亚洲去学佛法的时候，他心里其实很不快乐，但是他还是跟我一起去亚洲学佛。
And so we were living at the monastery, and you know, I really hung out with the nuns a lot, and I kind of knew rather quickly that I wanted to ordain, which is really strange because I knew very little bit about Buddhism before that, but there was this very strong feeling of, you know, this is something important and I want to dedicate my life to it.
所以那时候我们住在那个尼泊尔的道场，那我那时候就一直跟那些女众法师在一起。那令我觉得很压抑的是，我很早就知道我想出家。那虽然我从小都没有接触到佛法，但是接触到之后有很深刻的那个印象，心里非常想要出家。对不起，刚才法师也说过，他心里想说，他一生中不想有什么后悔，所以是因为这样，他就决定必定要去学佛。
So I requested ordination from my teachers, and they said yes, but you have to wait. I wanted to ordain right away. But your teacher tells you something, you follow your teacher's instructions.
所以那时候我就马上跟我的上师求戒，但是我的师父就跟我说你要等。那我那时候是非常的急着要去出家，但是当我的师父有跟我这样说的时候，就必定要听师父的话。
So my teacher told me to go back to the States, which I did. My husband also went back, and he knew by that time that I wanted to ordain. I had to tell my parents, and my parents completely freaked out.
所以那时候我就听了师父的话，回去美国跟丈夫一起回去。那时候跟父母跟他们说我要出家的时候，他们就马上完全发狂。
Okay, because they wanted a daughter with a different kind of personality. Yeah, they wanted somebody who, you know, would get a very good job, make a lot of money, give them grandchildren, go on vacations with the family. And none of that was very interesting to me.
因为我的父母的理想中的那个女儿的性格，应该就是要成家立业、赚大钱、生孩子，跟他们一起去度假。但是我对这些事情完全没有兴趣。
And when I told them I wanted to ordain, they said, "What are we going to tell our friends?" Yeah, this friend's daughter is a doctor, that friend's daughter is a professor. And we have to tell them that our daughter is becoming a nun, and she's going to live in a country where they don't even have flush toilets.
所以那时我的父母就非常的惊讶，说我们到底要跟我们的朋友怎么交代啊？这个朋友的女儿是医生啊，那个又这么有成就，那你要成为一个什么？然后又要跑去一个那种没有连厕所都不能拉水的一个地方去住，真的吗？
Yeah. So, and they really like my husband, and they're saying, "What are you doing? You know, kind of, did you take too many drugs?"
那我的父母其实是很喜欢我的丈夫，他们就完全不了解为什么我会要跟他离婚，那就问我你是不是吸了太多毒。
But when I thought about it, if I stayed and tried to be the kind of daughter my parents wanted, it still wouldn't make them happy. Yeah, they would still be dissatisfied with something, one thing or another. And also, I would just create so much negative karma that living a lay life, because I knew myself and my habits, that next life I would for sure have an unfortunate rebirth. And if I have an unfortunate rebirth, I can't benefit my parents, I can't benefit myself, I can't benefit anybody. So even though they didn't agree, I knew from my way of looking at life that what I was doing was good.
所以当我深思的时候，我也发现到，如果我留下来成为我父母理想的女儿的话，其实他们还是会不满的，还是不会愉快。那我也知道我自己的习气，如果我继续在家生活的话，我其实会造很多恶业。然后如果有恶的投生，我就连自己跟父母都不能带来任何的利益。所以我深思的时候就决定说，其实走出家的路是最好的。
So my husband, he didn't want me to leave, but he was incredible. He was so kind, and he knew that when I have an intention, I do it, and so he let me go very kindly.
那时候我的丈夫是非常舍不得我离开，但是他的人真的是很了不起，他了解我的个性。当我已经做了一个决定，我是一定会去做那件事，所以他把他的心里的那个他把我给放下了，他让我自由的去出家。
But it still had a happy ending, because my mother introduced him to another woman, and they got married.
但是这个故事还是有快乐的结局，因为我的母亲介绍了一个新的女朋友给他，然后他们最后还结婚。
Yeah, and they have 3 kids. Sometimes when I go back to Los Angeles, if the Dalai Lama is giving teachings near where they live, I'll stay at their house. And I'm so glad she's married to him and I'm not. Although he's a very, very nice man. Yeah.
所以现在我回去洛杉矶的时候，他们已经生了3个孩子，所以我会跟他们一起住。特别是当达赖喇嘛尊者在那里有传法的时候，那跟他们住的时候，我心里觉得幸亏我没有跟他结婚，是他那个女人跟他结婚。但是我还是看到他们还是随喜，因为我的那个前夫是一个非常友善的一个人。
Yeah. And so I ordained in Dharamsala Kyabje Ling Rinpoche, who was the previous life was the senior tutor of the Dalai Lama. He was my ordination master.
那时候我就在印度的达拉萨拉出家。那我的戒师就是达赖喇嘛尊者，他的那个戒师的前世是达赖喇嘛尊者的上师Ling Rinpoche.
Okay. And so I spent the first year studying in India and in Nepal.
那出家的初几年就是在印度跟尼泊尔学佛。
And then one day at the monastery in Nepal, I was drinking a cup of tea, and another nun just walked by me, and she said, "Oh, Lama thinks it would be very good if you went to the Italian center." And she kept walking, and I'm like, "What?"
所以那时候在尼泊尔的寺院呢，我在那里坐在那里喝茶的时候，忽然有一个女众法师这样路过，就跟我说：“哎，喇嘛觉得如果派你到那个意大利的佛法中心是一件好事。”我就觉得什么
Because my plan in my head was I was going to stay in Asia, find a nice cave, with central heating, and meditate and become a Buddha in this very lifetime.
因为那时候我本身的计划是要在亚洲留在亚洲找一个山洞，有暖气的山洞，然后在那里静坐就马上成佛。
Okay, but my teacher was sending me to Italy.
但是那时师父又要把我派去意大利。
And I thought, what am I going to do there? Eat spaghetti?
我去意大利到底要做什么？吃意大利面吗？
Well, there was a new Dharma center, and I was the spiritual program director, and I was also the disciplinarian. There were a few monks there. Yeah.
所以那时候把我派到意大利的时候呢，那有一个新的佛法中心，我就在那里指导他们的课程，然后也叫我做其他的法师的那个严守纪律的人。
Okay. So these monks, they were nice people, but per Italian culture, they were very macho, which means, well, you define it in Chinese.
对，这些意大利的男众法师，他们的为人是不错，但是就是意大利人嘛，就是那个男人大男人主义者，那个大男人主义非常的强。
So they did not like the idea of a nun, especially an American one, with her own mind, you know, being their disciplinarian.
所以他们就觉得很不服气，有一个美国来的，然后自己有独立思想的女人，变成他们的纪律管理他们的纪律的人，就觉得很不服气。
Yeah. So I didn't think I had a problem with anger. I was never a person who yelled and screamed or anything like that. I just kind of held it in and cried. But, you know, being there with these macho men, I discovered that I had a problem with anger.
所以直到那时候，我本身一直觉得我对愤怒其实没有什么大问题啊，我不会喊人骂人，但是就是把它闷在心里痛哭而已。但是那时候跟那些意大利来的有大男人主义者的男众师父一起互动的时候，就发现其实我对愤怒有很大的问题。
Yeah, so they teased me, they made fun of me, they interfered. They were horrible. Just sweet, innocent me, who would never say anything harmful to them, except once in a while.
所以这些男众法师在那里取笑我、侮辱我这个无辜可爱的小我。但是我完全是无辜的，我是不会去骂他们的。
Yeah. So in the daytime, I would go to my office and do my work in the Dharma Center. I would get so angry, you know. In the evening, I would go back to my room, and there's one text by Shantideva, an 8th century Buddhist sage, and in his book, Engaging in the Bodhisattva's Deeds, chapter 6 is about working with anger and generating fortitude. And I studied that chapter every night. And then every day I went back into my office and got furious again and came back and studied the chapter.
所以白天的时候，我到办事处嘛，就跟他们一起合作的时候，就非常非常的生气。那时候我在学几天那个8世纪圣者几天菩萨的入菩萨行论，那第6品就谈到如何调伏愤怒，如何发忍入心。我就每天晚上就在那里苦读这个第6品。那早上又回去办公室的时候，又开始大发脾气。
Yeah. So, where was I? Going back to my room and reading the book again. So this was a big thing to me, discovering I had anger. And I realized that this was also my teacher's way of training me. If he had said, you know, dear children, you have a problem with anger, I would have said, no, I don't. So what did he have to do to show me I had a problem with anger? Send me to work with these guys. And then I saw for myself my temper.
所以那天每天晚上回去这样苦读这个第6品，我就发现其实我对愤怒心里有很多愤怒，必须去调服它。那如果我的师父有跟我说，信爱的确准啊，你要必须调服你的愤怒，有一些问题，我会跟他说我没有愤怒啊。但是因为他把我派去意大利跟这些南众法师一起去合作的时候，其实是要培训我、训练我，我从中就发现到我心里必须要学习怎么调服愤怒。
So then my teacher came to the center, and I went to him and I said, Lama, please, can I leave here?
所以终于我的师父有来到佛法中心的时候，我就去祈求他说：“喇嘛，求求你，我要离开。”
Actually, this was before he came. This was over the telephone. I asked him if I could leave. And he said, we'll discuss it, dear. I'll be there in 6 months.
所以其实那时候是拨电话跟喇嘛祈求说：“喇嘛，求求你，我要离开。”那他就跟我说：“我6个月后会到那个佛法中心，到时才谈吧。”
So finally he came. He said I could leave. My brother was getting married. So my parents called. I hadn't heard from them in 3 years since I had left. Yeah, because they didn't want to talk to me. So when the person at the office said, your parents are on the phone, my thought was, who died? You know? But I went, and no, my brother's getting married. They want me to come, but I should look normal.
所以那时候喇嘛来了，就跟我说：“哦，你可以走。”那到那时候呢，我的父母就联络我，因为我的弟弟要结婚。那我已经3年的时间跟他们断绝联络，因为他们其实不想跟我有联系。但是，所以当我收到我的父母的电话的时候，就心里想：到底是谁去世了？反而是弟弟要结婚。那他们就跟我说：“我们要你回来参加婚礼，但是你要是以正常人的形式回来。”
Yeah. And my teacher said, yes, it was fine to go, but he said, you should be a California girl.
那我师父说：“你可以回去参加那个婚礼，但是你应该好像一个加利福尼亚的女士一样。”
And California girl was the last thing I wanted to be.
但是因为我出家，我是万万不想回到成为加利福尼亚女士的那个形态。
Okay, but your teacher tells you something, so you try. So the women in the Dharma Center dressed me up in lay clothes. I grew my hair so it was about that long, so my mother wouldn't cry in the mirror in the middle of Los Angeles International Airport. And I got on a plane and went back.
所以我就听了师父的话，那里佛法中心的女士就帮我找居士的衣服，把我给装扮，然后我把那个头发也留长了一点，因为如果所以当我到洛杉矶国际机场的时候，我的母亲才不会痛哭。那我就这样上了飞机回美国。
Yeah, so my parents, they tolerated it. It was okay. Yeah.
那时候我的父母就容忍我，其实整个婚礼都没事。
But they surprised me, and they said, because they lived about 45 minutes an hour from Shilai Temple, yeah, and so they said, well, why don't we stop there? We were going somewhere, and I said, okay.
那让我最惊讶的是，我回到美国的时候呢，我的父母他们的住家离佛光山的西来寺有45分钟到1个小时的车程，所以那时候他们驾车的时候就跟我说：“我们可以停在西来寺去参访一下。”
So they were in the middle of having a bhikshuni and bhikshu ordination at the temple. 2 of my friends who were also in the Tibetan tradition were there observing, and so when we came, my parents talked to my 2 friends.
所以那时候西来寺有传3坛大戒， 那我本身有2个在藏系的朋友也在那里观摩，所以我们父母到西来寺的时候就有机会跟我2位朋友一起交谈。
Yeah, so my friends were also Buddhist nuns, and while they were talking, I went for a walk, and then later when we got back in the car, my parents said, "Oh, they're such nice people." Yeah, what they didn't say was, "It's only our daughter who's weird."
所以那时候我的父母就跟我的朋友交谈，我的朋友也是女众出家人嘛。那之后在车上他们就跟我说：“你的朋友的为人真好。”那个隐含着就是说，其实只有我们的女儿是这么怪人，是怪人来的。
So I went back to Asia, and then what happened? Then later on, I was sent to France there, and then came back to Asia, and then I was sent to help with a new Dharma center in Hong Kong.
那我就回到亚洲，然后也被派到法国，然后又回到亚洲，然后之后被师父派到香港的一个新的佛法中心。
And while in Hong Kong, I knew I had the aspiration to take Bhikshuni ordination. They don't have the lineage for Bhikshunis in the Tibetan tradition, so we always had to go to either Vietnam or Taiwan or South Korea. So when I was in Hong Kong, I knew I could go to Taiwan easily. I had enough money for that plane ticket.
所以在香港的时候，其实我心里一直有要发愿去受比丘尼戒，因为我们在藏系的比丘尼传承已经流失了。那时候我知道，我就必须去越南、南韩还是台湾去受比丘尼戒。而因为我在香港嘛，就离台湾很近，那我有够储蓄可以买机票去台湾。
So one of my friends knew Venerable Hengqing, so that when I arrived at the Taipei airport, Venerable Hengqing picked me up and took me back to her flat, and she taught me all about Chinese etiquette, when you take your shoes off before going in the bathroom, and taking your shoes off before going in the kitchen, and all these kind of important things that we don't do in the U.S.
所以那时候到了台北机场，就是由恒清长老你来接我，就把我带回去他的公寓。那在那里就教了我很多很重要的细节，好像要进厕所要换什么鞋啊，还是走出去厨房也要换什么鞋，这些我们在美国都没有做的不同的礼仪。
Okay, so I don't know anything about Chinese Buddhism, nothing. Yeah, she dressed me in Chinese robes, and then put me on a bus. I went to Kaohsiung, got off the bus. Somebody from the ordination temple picked me up and took me back to the temple.
那时候我对汉传佛教是完全不认识的，所以恒清法师就给我穿那个汉传的僧服，把我买了车票，把我放在巴士上。那到了高雄那个戒场，就派了人来接我，带我去戒场。
Okay, so we get to the temple, and the lady who picked me up said, "Do you have a Chinese Buddhist name?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, sit down here. I'll go ask the master to give you a name."
所以那个帮忙接送我的女居士就问我：“你有没有中文的法名？”那我就说我没有啊。他就说：“你就坐在这，等一下我去找那个这里的师傅帮你请一个法名。”
So I sat there, and there were lots of people around walking by because the ordination program was going to start. And then somebody came by and said Amitofo, and somebody else came by and said Amitofo. And, it's like, oh, that's nice. And then finally that lady came back, and she said, did the master, did somebody tell you your Chinese Buddhist name? And I said, I think it's Amitofo.
所以那时候有好多人在路过嘛，因为那是戒场，对吗？很多人要来。 那很多人就跟我这样合掌说阿弥陀佛，阿弥陀佛。我就坐在那里，阿弥陀，那个女士就回来说，你有没有人跟你说你的新的法名？那我就说应该是阿弥陀佛吧。
She looked at me like, "You think you're 阿弥陀佛?"
那个女居士很压抑，说：“你以为你是阿弥陀佛啊？”
So, so that was my introduction. So, I was there for the whole month. There were only 2 Westerners. This was 1986. And so they weren't used to many Westerners coming. And so there was me and then one lady who was as old as my mom. And we were the only 2 Westerners. And they were really very, very kind and compassionate to us, considering that we didn't know anything.
那就是我对汉传佛教的入门。那当时是86年，西方人到台湾是不多，所以那时候戒场只有我跟另外一个女士。那她跟我的母亲同样年纪，就是我们2位。那但是整个戒期就对我们非常的慈悲。
But they were very concerned because they thought that both of us were losing weight. Yeah. And so one morning, there's like 500 or 600 people, in the dining hall. And one morning, the doors open, and they walk out with a big tray with Kellogg's cornflakes and milk. And the room's dead quiet. Everybody looks at them, and then they look at us. I wanted to crawl under the table because they came over and put the cornflakes and milk in front of the 2 of us. Oh, I was so embarrassed.
那时候戒会的主办商他们很关心我们2位西方人，可能那个吃中餐吃不惯嘛，开始很瘦，所以有一天早上的时候，早斋的时候，他们就捧了那个脆玉米片还有牛奶出来给我们。那每个人就这样瞪着我们看，我就觉得好尴尬，好想把自己躲起来。
Yeah, so that was part of my introduction to Chinese Buddhism. Later, I wound up, I'm trying to think, when was this? It must have been 1989, 1990. I was in Seattle, staying at somebody's home there. And, in the meantime, I had gone, I skipped something. My teachers then sent me to Singapore to be the Dharma teacher in a new center.
那在我回美国西雅图之前呢，我的师父就把我派去新加坡，也是一个新的佛法中心的主导人。
Yeah, so that was very nice. I developed like a real feeling for. I have some karma with Chinese. Yeah.
那时候在新加坡过得很愉快，我觉得我跟华人的那个因缘很深厚。
Okay. And the situation for Western monastics, especially for the nuns, was very difficult, because our teachers were Tibetans, and they were refugees after the communists invaded Tibet in the late 1940s. In 1959, there was an uprising against them. And the Dalai Lama and tens of thousands of Tibetans fled as refugees into India. So those were our teachers.
所以其实当时西方女众法师在藏系的整个状况非常的艰难，因为我们自己的上师他们也是难民，就是在共产党去侵略西藏之后，很多人就开始流亡。那59年之后，达赖喇嘛尊者就逃到印度，然后数千的藏人也随着他一起逃成为难民。那这些难民就是我们的师父。
So they were very poor as refugees. Their primary thing was to reestablish their monasteries. So they were very happy to teach the Westerners, but they couldn't build monasteries for us. They couldn't feed us or clothe us. We had to pay for everything.
那他们是藏族的难民，就非常的贫困，而他们主要的那个专注要在印度重建他们的寺院，所以他们很乐意教西方人佛法，但是就是没有办法护持我们。那我们身为西方的出家众，就必须自己付钱护持自己。
Yeah, so it was. Some people came from families that gave them a lot of money, and it was fine for them living in India as a monastic. My family didn't give me any money because they didn't agree with what I was doing. So I was quite poor, and it was a good experience. It taught me to save everything and not waste. But it was difficult.
那段时间，那些比较富有的出家人还是有家人支持的，就有家人供养，可以护持他们。但是我本身，我的父母就不赞成我的那个选择，就完全没有护持我，所以我那时候其实是蛮贫穷的。但是我觉得那是一段很好的经历，这教我真的要惜福，要什么都要省吃俭用。
Yeah. And then, of course, in India, at that time, the sanitation wasn't so good. So we got sick. We all had diarrhea. I got hepatitis. Then we had visa problems. Nepal and India wouldn't let us stay. So we were constantly having to go and then come back on a new visa. So there were many difficulties like this, just trying to live a monastic life there.
所以当时在印度要过着出家生活真的是很困难，因为在印度的卫生也是不是很好，所以很多人都得了疾病，好像肝炎等等。那我们签证上也是很多问题。
Yeah, but I was very happy, living there, living near my teachers, being able to go and talk to my teachers and receive a lot of teachings. My mind was very happy. Yeah, I wasn't so happy to go back to the West.
但是当时我真的是法喜充满，因为是跟我的师父住得很靠近，然后天天有机会学佛法，所以我心里是不想回到西方的。
Yeah, but the Western Dharma centers were new. So some of us were sent to work in them, in which case the centers provided room and board. But if we wanted to travel to go somewhere else to go to teachings, we had to pay our transportation. We had to pay the other Dharma center a fee to attend the teachings. We were basically treated like lay people.
所以当时很多在西方有很多新的佛法中心，就把我们派去那里领职，但是他们给我们住宿的地方。除此之外呢，如果要自己去学佛，还是就必须自己付费，特别是车费还是机票，还有有些佛法中心我们还要付钱去听法。
Yeah, Buddhism was very new in the West at that time. It was before the Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize. When we walked around in our robes in the West, some people, I remember this very well, we would walk past some people and they would think that we were Hindus, and they would go, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, and it was, no, that's not us, we're Buddhist.
所以那时候在西方的整个对佛教的认识还是很萌芽的阶段，但是在达赖喇嘛尊者得到诺贝尔和平奖项之前，所以我们在街上走的时候，就很多人以为我们是印度教的教徒，那里唱Hare Krishna 的那些歌，这样叫着我们，我就跟他们说不是，我们是佛教徒。
Yeah, and I remember even in Singapore, people were very surprised to see white people who were monastics. And I remember walking along the street one time, and one man drove by, and he was like this. And I thought he was going to crash the car or something, you know.
连在新加坡的时候，也有很多人很惊讶，说：“哎，白人会出家，成为出家众，佛教的出家众。他驾车的时候就这样瞪着我，我还怕他会出车祸。”
And one time somebody asked me to go to a restaurant for Sanghadana for lunch. And I went, and when we were walking in, she said, "Are you aware that everybody is staring at you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm used to it."
有一次有居士带我到餐馆去供养的时候，他跟我说：“哎，你知不知道整个餐馆的人都在瞪着你？”然后我说：“我已经很习惯了。”
Yeah, so it was hard living in the East. It was difficult in the West. People thought we were just weird, you know.
我们在东方住还是在西方住，所有的人就是觉得我们是很古怪的，就很困难。
Yeah, and then still not having enough. You know, what happened is many Western monastics had to go out and get jobs when they went back to the West, which means you put on lay clothes, you work a job, you have to grow your hair out a little bit, you come home, you change into your robes, you go to the Dharma center.
那有很多西方的出家众就没有办法回到西方的时候，必定要找工作做。那就好像过着居士的生活，早上的时候要把头发留长，然后在白天的时候就穿普通居士的衣服去上班，然后之后回到佛法中心才换回僧袍。
But I didn't want to do that, and I remember one of my teachers saying that the Buddha said, if you practice well, you will not go hungry. So even though I didn't have much money, I said, I believe what the Buddha said. I'm not getting a job. I'm not wearing lay clothes. And somehow, I'm still alive. Yeah.
那时候我心里觉得我是不想过这样的生活，我的上师有说过，佛陀有说，如果你好好修学佛法的话，那不会饿肚子的。我就深信佛陀的话，我就发愿说我不要去做工，我不要穿居士的衣服啊。那到现在我还是没有死掉，还在。
Yeah, but the wish at that time was really growing in me, that I would really like to start a place for Western monastics where they could live and they don't have to work and they don't have to worry about food, clothing, shelter, and so forth.
那时候我在心里开始发愿说，我要成立一个地方，让西方的出家众有地方住，他们不需要付钱，也不要去愁吃愁穿，盖一个地方给他们一起共住。
So anyway, I was living in Seattle. I was the resident teacher for a Dharma center there.
所以到那个时候，我已经在西雅图，我成为一个佛法中心的那个常驻的教授授课法师。
But starting a monastery is a really big thing, and the Dharma centers are all lay people. I tried to. I talked to some of my other friends who were also nuns, but they were all busy with their own projects. Yeah, because I didn't want to start something alone, but they were all busy.
所以要建立一个出家众的寺院不是件小事。但是那时候的佛法中心都是由居士来管理嘛。那我有跟我的出家的朋友一起讨论，但是他们都已经有自己的不同的方案在进行，都很忙。那我本身又不想一个人站出来去建一个寺院。
So one day back in Dharamsala, I went to visit one Lama, and I was telling him I wanted to do this, but I couldn't find anybody to do it with, and he said, "Then, well, you just have to start the monastery yourself."
所以那时候我回到印度达拉姆萨拉的时候，就跟一位喇嘛去求法。那我就跟他说整个状况嘛，我找不到人跟我一起合作。那位喇嘛就跟我说，那你就没办法，你必定要一个人站出来，先做那个开发的人，开发这个寺院的人。
Okay. So again, I was, homeless, this time in the West, without a particular place to live. And then I got a letter from a friend who lives in Idaho, okay? Idaho is one state in the U.S. that's famous for potatoes. So when I received this invitation to go teach the Dharma at a center in Idaho, I thought, all they have is potatoes there. They have Buddhists, really?
所以那时候在西方，我是一个无家可归的，在漂泊的一个僧人。那有一天，我就收到了一封信，请我到爱达荷州去教法。那我心里说，啊，爱达荷州那里只有马铃薯嘛，那是最有名的一个种马铃薯的地方，有佛教徒吗？
But I didn't have a settled place to live at that time, so I went. And one of the people from the Dharma Center knew about my aspiration to start a monastery. And so we went all over southern and central Idaho looking for land.
所以那时候，因为我没有固定的地方住，我就回复了这个邀请，就到爱达荷州去教法。那个佛法中心有一个居士，他知道我心里非常有发愿要去盖一个寺院，他就带着我到爱达荷州的南部跟中部去开始找一片地。
Okay, and I knew quite specifically the qualities I wanted in the land, and we didn't really find anything there. But then some friends were living in northern Idaho, and they said, well, we'll look. And then they wrote, and they said, come up here.
所以那时候我心里已经有我心里理想的那片地的有某些特征，但是我们在寻找的时候还是找不到。那时候在北爱达荷州的一些佛友就跟我说，我们可能已经找到你适合你心想的那片地。
But before I went there, they sent me a realtor's website, and I looked on it, and there was one place that was for sale in Washington State, and I love windows and I love sunshine, and the picture of the house, it had lots of windows, and I said, wow, let's go there and look. And then I looked at the price, and I again said, wow.
所以那时候我的佛友就介绍一个房地产经纪人的一个网页给我，那我就上去看，那里就看到，华盛顿州有一个地方，那里的那些照片看起来有很大的窗户，好美。我是很喜欢有大的窗户的地方，我就心里想，哇，应该我想去看这个地方。那当时在那个网页看到那个价钱，我心里也想，哇，好大的问题。
Because I didn't have much money, I had been teaching a lot, so I saved the dana I received from teaching. A few people had made donations, but I certainly didn't have enough to buy land. Anyway, we went up to look at that place with all the windows.
所以那时候我身上的钱不多，我有弘法，人家有给我供养，我就慢慢储蓄起来。但是我当然是不足够的钱去买一片地，但是我还是随着佛友一起去看华盛顿州的那片有大窗户的那个地方。
Yeah, and it was beautiful. The land, its forest, meadows. If this was kind of up, there was a valley, but this was partway up the valley, so you had an incredible view. And if you're meditating a lot, you want to be able to walk in nature, look long distances, and so on. So the place was just gorgeous.
所以我到了那里，那片地真的是很优美，是有森林、有草地，然后是在山谷的中间，所以从那里的景色是非常的优美。那我们要建一个寺院嘛，如果要有人家在禅修的时候要有美的景色来看，那个心里就觉得比较平静。
Okay. So my friend that I went to look at it with, we walked up. They had a hill and back, We walked up there, and then we thought, oh, let's go back to the barn and look. Our real estate agent had, at that time, who had brought us up there and shown us the place, she wanted to go, so she said bye, and she left, and we walked to the barn.
所以那时候我跟一个朋友在那片地有一个小山丘，我们就站在那里谈话之后想，我们回去那个仓库是吗？马房的那个地方，我们再去看一下。那时候我们的房地产经纪人已经说我看够了，我也先离开。所以那个经纪人离开了，我跟我的朋友就回到那个马房那里去看看。
Now I didn't know that the person selling the property and the person buying property, the realtors did not want us to talk to each other. But I didn't know that. When we went back to the barn, the owner happened to be there, and we started talking to him.
所以那时候我不了解到，那个售卖那个产地的人跟要买那个产地的人应该是不要交流的，因为经纪人是不要你们一起这样单独这样交流。我不知道嘛。那时候我们就到了那个谷仓的时候，就遇见那个要售卖那片地产产地的人，我们就开始谈话。
So I was with my friend, and we said, oh, the property's lovely, And then my friend said, which he didn't know either about, we weren't supposed to talk to each other. Then he said, but we don't have enough money to get it. And the banks will not give a loan to a religious group, because if they have to foreclose, then it looks very bad for the bank.
所以那时候我们就开始跟那个售卖那个产地的人一起谈话，我就说，哎呀，我就是不够钱买啊。然后我们那时候因为是宗教团体，银行是不会给我们借钱的。如果要取消我们的贷款的话，就看起来对外是非常尴尬，对吗？就这样跟他谈起来。
So the owner also, he didn't know that we weren't supposed to be talking. So when my friend said, oh, we only have so much to give as a down payment, which wasn't going to be enough, then he said, oh, that's okay, we'll carry the mortgage for you.
所以那时候的屋主也不知道不应该跟我们再交谈，所以他听说，我们不够钱付那个抵押，他就说，我就帮你们先承担那个抵押吧。
Then the other thing was the planning and zoning code to make sure that we could build a monastery there, because the land just had a house and a barn and, and a garage. And so my friend who I was staying with there, she was collecting the planning and zoning codes from all the counties, because we were looking for land. But this particular county, when I looked in her file, there was no planning and zoning code. And I said, oh, Susan, you didn't get this one, and this is where the property is. And she said, they don't have a planning and zoning code. Yeah, which means it's a rural area, but without a P&Z code, you can build whatever you want.
但是那时候我就找我的朋友去探索一下那片地到底是有什么法规嘛，规律说那可以在那里建什么。那我的朋友Susan就帮我去找。那时候我看了他所找的资料，我说，你没有找到这片地啊，到底是有什么规律嘛？那个分区的规律可以建什么？你没找到吗？他就跟我说，其实完全都没有规律啊，这片地你要建什么都可以。
Okay, so we purchased the land, yeah, and the first 3 residents moved in. First 3 residents were me and 2 cats.
我们那时候就买了这片地，那我们首3位住众就搬了进去。那首3位住众是谁呢？是我本身，还有2只猫。
Yeah, and at the early days, I remember sitting there in the evenings going, how are we going to pay this mortgage? How are we going to pay this mortgage? And the cats just looked at me.
所以我还记得早期的时候，我在傍晚的时候就坐在那栋房子里面，在那里问说，这个抵押贷款我到底要怎么给他付完？那2只猫就这样看着我。
And I was young when I ordained. I had never owned anything, never owned a car, never owned a house, never owned anything. And then here there is this mortgage, and I'm responsible. And so I just took refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and I said somehow it's going to work out.
那时候我很年轻就出家，我其实都没买房子，没买车。那忽然现在要有这个抵押要负责，我就在那里心里想，我真的要皈依佛法僧，就一定会有出路。
Yeah. As it turned out, we paid, it was a 30-year mortgage. We paid it off early. And we saved about $30,000 in interest by doing that. And it was astounding to me that happened.
所以那时候我们是一个30年的抵押贷款，但是我们是提早还清了，然后还省了3万块的利息。对我来说是真的是万万想不到会有这种事情发生。
Yeah. But the area where we bought the land, no Buddhists. Yeah, again, I mean, there's hardly any Buddhists in the States, and we were in a rural area, and people would say to me, because we had a lot of forest land, and they said, "Aren't you afraid of, walking in the forest with the cougars and the bears?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm more afraid to walk in New York City." Yeah.
所以那里美国是佛教徒的数量非常少。那我住在这么偏僻的地方，就很多人问我，你一个人在森林走会怕吗？有山猫，有熊。但是我说我在纽约走还更害怕。
Okay, so the land is located in Washington State, which is on the West Coast, the same state where Seattle is located, but on the other side of the state. And so some of the people, because I had been teaching at a Dharma center in Seattle, they started coming over and they started helping. And they started a little group called Friends of Shravasti Abbey.
所以那时候那片地就是在华盛顿州的，就是美国的西部，但是西雅图是在那个华盛顿州的西部，我们就在东部。那时候我在西雅图已经弘法有蛮多年了，所以那时候那些佛友，我的学生就开始过来当志工，那他们就开始设立一个团体，叫舍卫精舍的佛友。
And the name Shravasti Abbey came because I had submitted to His Holiness the Dalai Lama some various names that I thought would fit, and he chose that one. And I had suggested that one because it's a town in ancient India where the Buddha spent 25 raining season retreats. So a lot of sutras had been spoken there, and also there were very substantial communities there of monks and of nuns.
那我的寺院为什么会取舍卫精舍这个名字？就是因为我当时有跟达赖喇嘛尊者提名，那他就选了舍卫精舍这个名字。而我会想到舍卫精舍，是因为在古印度的舍卫城，佛陀在那里结了25个下安居，然后在那里也弘法，然后那时候也有比丘跟比丘尼2个住众在那里，所以我就是想到这个舍卫城，就会想到这个名字舍卫精舍。
And then I thought, as one of the, principles of the Abbey, that we do not buy our own food, that we're only going to eat food that is offered to us. So people could bring food, we would cook it, or but we were not going to the grocery store to buy food. And people said to me, "You're going to starve." Because in America, who lives like that, Everybody goes and buys their own food, and I said, well, let's just try.
所以当我们建寺院的时候，我决定说，我们一个基本的原则是，我是不会出去买食物，不要到超级市场自己去购买食物，要等居士来供养，然后我们可以自己煮。那很多人就跟我说：“你是疯了吧？你这么做一定会饿死。”我就跟他们说：“我们试一试吧。”
So early on, somebody in the city that is the nearest city to us, Spokane, which is about hour and a quarter, hour and a half from the Abbey. One of the journalists for the Spokane paper came out one day, and they wanted to do an interview and learn what this new thing was out in Penderay County.
所以最靠近我们的一个城市是叫斯波堪的城市，那里有一个记者就出来来访问我，要探索一下，这个新的一个建筑到底是什么。
And so I told them about it, and I said also that, we don't buy our own food, and, and just kind of things about Buddhism. And they printed a very nice article about us in the Sunday paper.
所以我就跟他们解释说，什么是寺院啊？为什么我们没有出去自己买食物？这样跟他们解释跟介绍。那之后他们就写了一个很好的一个文章，在那个报纸上刊登。
And so a few days after that, somebody drives up in an SUV. We don't know this person. They just drive up, and their car is packed with food. And she said,I read the article in the paper, and I thought, I want to give these people food.
那过了几天，就有一个居士驾了一个大辆的汽车，那个运动型的那种汽车上来，那整个汽车就是塞满了食物。然后他就跟我说，我前几天看了这个报道，我心里就发愿说，我要供养这些人，护持他们。
So, I mean, it was just so touching to see.A complete stranger drive up with a car packed with food, and just the kindness of sentient beings. And this is why, in ancient times, the Sangha went on Pindapat and just collected alms. And so that's basically the tradition we were trying to go back to. But it really makes you...experience in your own life the kindness of others, because you know that you're alive because others, out of the goodness of their heart, share what they have with you.
所以竟然会有一个完全陌生的人会在挤满食物的车上来供养我们，我是非常的感动。那就是因为这样，我还是想回归到古印度时代，佛陀会叫僧侣出去托钵，就是因为要感受到我们有生存，是因为其他人的慈心和善心，我们才有生存的机会啊。所以因为这样，我们僧侣就要依赖着居士，才可以有修行的机会。
Yeah. So we've never starved. Yeah.And we have retreats there where people come and stay with the monastic community, and they bring food, and we cook it together, and we, everybody eats.
所以至今我们是还没饿过肚子。我们有办禅修营的时候，就居士会带食物来供养，我们就一起分享，一起共煮，一起共修。
So gradually people started to hear about the Abbey.And so some people who were already Buddhists came to visit. Some people who knew nothing about Buddhism would drive up the road and say, yeah, who are you guys? We moved into the community. The local town has about 1,500 people. It's a very small town, one stoplight. And...We just went in very slowly. We didn't do some big thing, but went in very slowly, paid all our bills on time. That's a good way to have good relationships with people. And people slowly started coming and participating.
所以渐渐越来越多人就开始有听说，有这个精舍，那有佛教徒有来参访，也有非佛教徒驾车上来说，这是什么东西啊？那我们就渐渐这样融入我们最靠近的小镇，只有1500个人，有一条马路，一个红灯，一个红绿灯。那但是从中我们就是这样渐渐很低调的开始去融入社区，准时付账，那跟大家的那个关系就很好。
So as more people came, then we had to build more spaces. The first thing we did was change the garage into a meditation hall.
那我们就因为有越来越多人来，我们就渐渐要开始建更多的更多栋房子。那我们第一件事就是把那个停车的车库把它改变为一个禅堂。
And it was interesting because before we even got the property, some people had gifted us a big Buddha statue. Some people had gifted a few Tibetan-style paintings of the sages. Somebody else gifted us the Kangyur and Tengyur, all the sutras, the Mahayana sutras, and the Indian commentaries. And this was before we even had the property and a place to put them. So it was kind of like the Buddhas were coming and saying, okay, come on, we want to move in, get the property already. Yeah.
所以最奇妙的是，在我买地之前，已经有人送了我一个佛像，那也有送那个藏系所画的圣者的画，也有送我们那个藏文的大藏经，还有论点。那就好像是佛菩萨说：“我们已经到了，你赶快去买那片地给我们住吧。”
So the first building was the meditation hall. Then we built a cabin where I would live. It had no running water, but I was very happy living there. I lived there 12 years. Yeah.
所以我们先是把那个车库装修为一个禅堂，然后之后呢，就给法师建了一个小木屋，那里是没有自来水的，但是他住了12年，觉得很开心。
Yeah. Then we were running out of space for where the nuns were living, so we built a residence for the nuns.
那有越来越多女众来出家，就也是不够位给他们住。我们下一栋屋子就是建一个给女众住的一栋房子。
And then we were running out of space for the dining room and the kitchen, so we had to build a new building with a dining room and a kitchen.
那时候斋堂啊、大寮都不够位了，就开始要盖一个比较大的房子，才有位给大家用食。
And then they really insisted that they build a cabin with running water where I could live. And I kept saying, I don't need it. I'm happy where I am. No, we're building the cabin. So they didn't say it exactly like that. Yeah, so there's a small cabin where I live.
所以那个我们的注重就一直跟法师坚持说，我们要建一个新的小木屋给你好不好？至少要有自来水。那我一直说，我不需要。但是注重就一直坚强说，我们要给你盖一个比较好的房子。就最后就建了一个新的一个木屋给法师住。
And then we wanted to get some more teachers there, so we built another cabin for guest teachers.
那我们也要请外来的法师来讲法，我们就建了多一个木屋给外来的法师住的地方。
Okay, and then we still were growing. We have 24 residents now. Yeah, so and 4 cats. So.
所以我们不断的在增长嘛。现在我们有24位注众，还有4只猫。
But it was still too small because we outgrow the garage, the meditation hall. So we were having the teachings in the dining room. When we had a lot of people there for retreats, meditation was in the dining room. This was not working so well. So we decided to build the Buddha hall.
所以就是越来越多人来的时候，我们这个小车库禅堂真的是容纳不了大家，所以开始静坐啊，还有讲法都变成要在斋堂讲法静坐，真的是不适当的一个环境，所以我们就开始要建一个大殿。
Yeah, so that's our latest project, building the Buddha Hall, and continuing to build the community, and really. Emphasize Buddhist education, make it so that the Sangha has a good education, they know the Vinaya. We do the major Vinaya rites, the fortnightly posada where we confess and restore our precepts, the 3-month Varsa retreat, the ceremony at the end of that, the pravarana, the katina, the offering of robes. So we do the major Vinaya rituals there. And they're really wonderful. We have all of them are translated in English, so we understand what we're saying.
所以我们现在就开始要建大雄宝殿，正在进行中。我也非常强调要好好的建立僧团，僧众应该受一个很好的佛法的教育，也必定要学戒。所以我们在道场有佛陀所制最重要的在戒律上的一些仪轨，我们都有做，就是半月有诵戒，那也有结安居，然后安居完毕也有自治，也有受功德仪。那我发现说，当我们好好持戒，做这些不同的仪轨的时候，真的给我们很大的一个影响力。
And so for women, we give the Shramaneri and the Shikshamana ordination, so the novice ordination and the training ordination. We give them there. We have enough bhikshunis, in the community. And our dream is, when the Buddha Hall is finished, to be able to give the bhikshu and bhikshuni ordination at the abbey in English.
对，所以重要的是这些仪轨我们都翻译成英语，所以我们在进行的时候才会了解到它的含义。那我们现在传沙弥尼戒和四叉摩那尼戒都是我们自己的注重，已经足数可以传解。那我们就发愿说，在大雄宝殿盖完之后，是非常希望有机会传比丘、比丘尼戒，而是用英语传戒，大家才知道我们在说什么。
Yeah, the community is very nice. People are really harmonious, and you're very welcome to visit. You can come when we have a retreat or a course or something like that, or you can just come whenever. And then just join the community in living according to our monastic schedule.
我们的僧团都很和合，也非常的欢迎大家来跟我们一起共住共修。那你就可以经历我们出家人的那个生活的形态。
Yeah, and I guess that's a little bit about the Wild West,
就是
It is wild.
这样简短跟大家介绍我们在蛮荒的那个西方怎么去建立佛法，真的是一个荒地。
Yeah. So if you have questions or comments, please, we have a few minutes for that.
现在有一点时间，所以开阔来给大家发问。
谢谢。我是退休的英文西班牙话口译法律口译，你的口译很棒，很棒。
He's a retired translation teacher. He said your translator is pretty good.
No, I said your interpreter is excellent. I'm a retired courtroom interpreter, English, Spanish. It's a very high standard, and your interpreter has a quite wide and deep range of vocabulary in both languages.
Okay.
Yeah. My question is, you mentioned very early in your talk, being critical of the Western religions that I'm familiar with, because they didn't make sense to you in several ways. But I notice you have interfaith operations going on. How do you reconcile that thought, those opinions, with working with those other people from those religions that don't make sense?
Okay, it's no problem. We don't have to all think alike or agree in order to get along. Yeah, so we get along quite well. There's some Catholic nuns that live kind of nearby, and they said before we were moved there, they were praying some more people, spiritual people would move in the neighborhood. So when we came, they were very happy. So, we get along well with them. We talk about, similar things that we do in our religions. Oh, you want to translate? Yeah, you. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Do that, and then I'll continue.
他就是问说，法师年轻的时候对其他的宗教有很多批评嘛？那现在是怎么跟其他的宗教进行交流？因为看到我们网页有那个录影片有谈到这一点。那法师就是说，我们跟其他宗教交流是没有冲突的嘛？我们虽然没有同样的信仰，但是还是可以一起和的交流。那我们在社区有天主教的修女，那在我们盖寺院之前，他们已经在那里祈祷。
Yeah, so we talk about things that we have in common. We talk about our differences, but it's very enriching. Like I said, we don't have to believe in the same things to get along with other people.
所以那些天主教的修女就是祈祷说，希望一些有信仰的人会搬到我们的社区，那就是我们的道场。那就从这里就看得到说，我们虽然不是有同样的信仰，还是可以一起和的共住，一起交流。
Yeah. So one year we were doing retreat on the Medicine Buddha, and one of the Catholic nuns, she took the text we had and kind of changed it so it made sense to her from a Christian view, and she did her retreat on seeing Jesus as the divine physician. So it went very well with Medicine Buddha.
有一次，我们的精舍就是主办了一个药师佛的禅修营。那有一个天主教的修女有跟我们一起来共修，那她就拿了我们那个药师佛的仪轨，就把它转变成说怎么把耶稣思维成最圣的一个医师啊，就这样就没有冲突。
Thank you.
I come from India. Firstly, I would like to thank you for spreading the teachings of the Buddha. I'm sure it has helped me, and the teachings have been helping us for more than 2,000 years. My question is regarding the meditation. I've been practicing Vipassana meditation for quite some time, and I practice meditation which are taught by you. So can we do that? I mean, practice Vipassana and practice the meditations which are taught in Vajrayana tradition?
Yeah, there's no problem. The Buddha taught many teachings because people have different dispositions and different interests. Yeah.
所以，先我要感谢法师，在全世界这样弘法，因为我本身从佛陀的教义受了很多利益。那我的问题是关于禅修的方式。那我本身是学毗婆舍那怎么修观，对吗的方式。那我同时也可以修金刚乘所教的那些不同的禅修方式吗？那法师的回复是可以的，因为佛陀教了很多不同的静坐的方法的法门。
But to practice Vajrayana, you need quite a bit of practice of other topics before that. So it's important to study and practice and seek out a really good teacher for that. But Tibetan Buddhism itself, has a kind of vipassana meditation. It's different than what you usually hear as vipassana, but vipassana is taught differently in different Buddhist traditions. So there's also that meditation in Tibetan Buddhism.
所以要修金刚乘的话，必须先有学佛的，要打好那个基础，也要找到一个有具德的一个上师，跟他一起学习怎么做这个金刚乘的静坐法门。但是在整个藏传佛教中，有很多教不同的法门，也有教怎么做毗婆舍那的禅修方式啊，就就是可以以不同的方式去学怎么做毗婆舍那的修观的禅修。
And then, like Chinese Buddhism, we have Medicine Buddha, Amitabha, Kuan Yin, Manjushri, Samantabhadra. All those bodhisattvas are common in the traditions.
那藏传佛教跟汉传佛教一样，也有修观音、阿弥陀佛、药师佛跟文殊菩萨跟普贤菩萨的各个法门都共同有修。
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I want to ask a question about how did you know right away that you want to get ordained, and did that happen before or after you found your teacher, and before or after you know what lineage you want to follow?
Okay. When I started, I didn't know anything about different lineages. Yeah. I didn't know anything about the importance of having a teacher. I knew like minus nothing, okay? Minus 100. But what I did know is that what these lamas said was true for me, and that I wanted to learn more. So I just kept going back. Yeah. They happen to be Tibetan Buddhists, and the way that Tibetan Buddhism is presented with the emphasis on reasoning and logic, that fit very well with me. And the Lamrim, or the gradual stages of the path, that approach to the Dharma fit very well with me, and the analytic meditations. So I just kept going back. And then after a while, I heard in the teachings, oh yeah, you're supposed to have a teacher, and like this. But for me, it just happened very organically.
所以法师是怎么为什么会发心要出家？会发心是在你认识到不同的传承和找到师父之前所发生的吗？还是之后？那法师的回答就是说，当我一开始认识到佛法的时候，是一无所知，那时候是零下100的那种无知。但是我听到喇嘛的教义，我就觉得是真实的话。我就因为这样就被吸引，一直在回去。那我在学藏传佛教的教义的时候，我非常喜欢他们强调要以推理还有理论的方式去了解佛法，有教道次第，也有教分析性的静坐法门。那从中我就觉得很相应，就不断的一直回去，那就发现说要找一个师父，那就认识跟亲近这些师父，就跟随着他们，所以是很自然的一个过程，这样慢慢的演变。
Yeah, it's not like that for everybody. Some people just want to try out everything, like it's a buffet dinner. And some people, the first teacher doesn't fit with them, so they go until they find a teacher and a practice that really suit them.
那每个人的那个遇见佛法的整个过程是不一样的。那有些人他们是好像要吃自助餐一样去试探很多不同的地方，还是传承有些人是初次认识的那个师父可能不相应，就要找其他的师父，就是看每个人的因缘。
Okay, there's one here.
Oh. 可以，后面有先由你，我可以帮你翻，可以，没问题。
我想我刚刚听到法师这个过程，让我印象很深刻的是，因为 法师觉得自己没有受比丘尼戒，所以到了台湾，然后现在又在要传承比丘尼戒，是用那个英文的方式来做。我就想请教法师，那法师对于所谓的受戒或持戒，它的一个意义或者它的一个看法是什么？谢谢，阿弥陀佛。
So I'm very deeply impressed by what you taught, how you had the aspiration to receive the Bhikshuni precepts, and now you have the aspiration to give the Bhikshuni ordination in English. So could you please talk about what receiving precepts and upholding precepts, what is the meaning of that to you?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Whoa. First of all, the precepts give structure to your life. And it makes you be very clear about your ethical standards and your values.
所以我们有持戒的话，是给我们的生活带来一个很清楚的结构。那我们也会清楚我们的道德行为，还有道德理论，还有我们的对我们心里最深信的那些品德，开始有一个方向。
Yeah. So for me, the precepts, I needed structure, that kind of ethical structure. So it was very helpful. Also, it involves a whole lifestyle. You know, your lifestyle changes, and you live with other monastics, and you don't collect a lot of things, and you know, you don't look at the stock market, and yeah. So the whole way you live changes.
那因为有受戒，就给我整个道德行为的生活有带来一个新的结构，那使我整个生活的方式也转变，好像要跟其他的，特别是出家戒嘛，就跟其他的出家众一起共住，就不会储存很多不需要的东西，也不会去炒股票，整个生活方式完全变了。
When I was first ordained as a shramaneri, my focus was very much on my Dharma practice. Yeah, I wanted to listen to teachings. I wanted to practice the Dharma. My teachers talked about bodhicitta, so yes, I wanted to benefit others, but everything was very much concerned with myself.
我开始在受沙弥尼戒的时候，我整个修行的过程就是专注于我个人的修行。那我的师父有谈到要发菩提心，要利益众生，我有听到这些教义，但是我心里还是对自己的修学是觉得是最重要的。
But when I became a bhikshuni, that my motivation totally changed, because it really hit me here that I have the opportunity to take these precious precepts, because for 2,500 years, people have taken the precepts and kept them and passed the ordination down, and from generation to generation, so that you have the lineage of the precepts coming from the Buddha. And it just hit me so strong that it's like what I received was the culmination by taking ordination. The Bhikshuni ordination was like this big wave of the Buddha Dharma kind of coming from the time of the Buddha to the present. And I just got to sit on top of that wave, riding along, upheld by generations of millions of people who practiced. You know, even though I don't know them, they died centuries ago. So it became very strong to me that now I have responsibility to maintain the tradition. Yeah, I have responsibility to do the best I can to keep my precepts, and if I can, to pass it on to other people.
当我在受比丘尼戒之后，我的发心就完全转变了，就发现说我有这个可贵的机会受戒，是因为有2500年的那个修行者不断的从佛陀的时代保留着整个戒律的传承，这样一代一代传下来，我才有机会受戒，就好像一个很大的海潮的巅峰一样，我就很容易的在那里很顺利的在那个海潮上浮着，但是就是因为有2500年的 我完全不认识的修行者在那里护持着我，我才有机会这样受戒。所以我心里就发现说，真的很深刻的觉得，我现在是我有这个责任，要继续把戒律的传承传下去。
Yeah. In other words, it's not all about me anymore.
就发现说，其实我不能自私自利啊，修行不是为了我个人的。
两位法师好，我有一个问题哦，是有关于佛教未来在西方的发展。刚刚法师也有提到，就是相对于其他宗教，佛教是相对理性的，就是你可以相信你所信的，而不是说这是谁跟你讲的，是什么神说的。那如果我们比较西方跟东方，我相信西方人更注重理性的思辨跟讨论，所以我想请问，佛教未来在西方的发展是指日可待吗？还是目前还有潜在的困难是完全看不到的？谢谢法师。
So my question is about the future of Buddhism in the West, especially because you mentioned that Buddhism is a religion that's based on reasoning and logic. You don't have to believe whatever a deity told you, but it's based on your reasoning that you have faith. So when we compare the East and the West, what are your thoughts on the development of Buddhism in the West? Is the momentum gathering? It's like growing, or are there challenges that we don't know about that we will face?
I think that it's growing slowly, yeah, but steadily, yeah. And just the fact that we have 24 monastics is, that's a 24, that's a 20, no, how many percent increase, of when we start. So yeah, people are much more interested. I think there's a few challenges in bringing Buddhism to the West. There's a lot of lay teachers now, and the way the lay teachers teach sometimes is quite different than the way the monastics teach. Yeah? Yeah, so that's one thing. I think the monastics are really following a tradition, and we want to maintain that tradition. The lay teachers are a little bit more into adapting things from the West into what they're teaching. What else? The lay teachers, some of them have a lot of respect for the monastics, some don't. And so that rubs off on their students, so that some of the new Buddhists, have respect for monastics, some don't. Some will say, oh, you're celibate, you're just denying your sexuality, what's wrong with you? So that kind of attitude, it shows to me that they don't really understand what the Buddha's teaching. So I think in those situations, many people are coming to the Dharma not seeking a path to liberation from samsara, but seeking something that will help them to be calmer and happier in this life.
所以佛法在西方有逐渐的增长，也是很稳固的，慢慢的这样增长。你看到我们道场现在有24位注重，就是那个认可。但是可能在挑战当中，是在西方有比较多居士的授课师。那由居士来授课呢，就比较善于把西方文化融入佛法，不像好像出家法师就比较专注于要把整个传承的那个系统保留起来。那由居士传法，有些居士也对僧众没有什么恭敬的想法，那他们的弟子也就一样对 对僧众也是有同样没有那个恭敬的态度，特别是他们觉得僧众已经禁欲了，就可能是在压抑自己的性欲，就不了解为什么要过着出家的生活。所以然后有比较，就看得出说，很多人在西方学佛法，可能是为了要把心平静下来罢了，而不是在寻找一个能解脱轮回的一个道路。好多问题，有3个人。There are 3 questions.
We'll do 2 more questions.
Okay. Thank you for sharing so many down-to-earth stories in this section. And I would love to ask you a question about how to practice with anger.
How to practice with what?
Anger.
Anger.
Oh.
就是谢谢法师以很多踏实的例子分享佛法，想请问法师如何调伏愤怒？
Okay. Are you talking about your anger, or did you bring your husband with in your?
你是说要调伏自己的愤怒，还是你带了你的丈夫来听法，要调伏他的愤怒，是吗？
Well, none of it. I'm asking this because also this is a pretty down-to-earth question in daily life.
Yes.
And also for both all of us in this section or to the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Say your question in Chinese.
So, okay.
I've translated it already.
Okay.
Oh, no, I've translated the question
Oh,
already.
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Buddha taught many, many ways to deal with anger. It's not, I mean, I could go on for another few years about it, but I will recommend a couple of books to you. His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote a book called Healing Anger, and then I did a book called Working with Anger. And they're both based on the Shantideva's text, chapter 6. So I would say read those. I mean, just because it's such a big subject, I really can't go into it now. Also on my website, chuptanchudran.org, there's a lot of talks I've given in the past just about anger. Yes? But?
Hey. What did you learn when you were in Italy with the macho monks?
Well, what did I do?
What did you learn? Yeah.
What did I learn? The big thing I learned was I had a problem with anger, and that the anger destroys merit. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to destroy merit. What I learned was, I mean, just the things in chapter 6, I really practiced them. One important thing I learned was that when people do harmful things, what they're really trying to say is, I want to be happy, but I'm suffering right now. And so they think by doing whatever action they're doing that is harmful to somebody else, because of their ignorance, they think that action is going to bring them happiness, but it brings them suffering. So that person is not, should not be an object of my anger. They should be an object of my compassion, because they're suffering. Yeah, and they don't know the cause of happiness and how to create that.
所以要谈到调伏愤怒，其实是个很大的一个话题，要花几年的时间才可以好好的解释。因为佛陀教了无数的法门，教我们怎么调伏愤怒。那我可以推荐2本书，达赖喇嘛尊者写的《Healing Anger》应该是治愈愤怒，还有法师本身也有写一本《Working with Anger》调伏愤怒。那这2本书都是照着《入菩萨行论》第6品的资料而写的。那个居士朋友就问了法师，在意大利跟那些大男人主义者的出家众到底学到了什么？那法师就是说，他学到说， 他本身真的还是必须要去调伏愤怒，真的在自己的修行中要实践这第6品的那些教义。那最重要的是发现到，当有一个人对你生气的时候，其实他的含义，他所要说的话是：我想要快乐，但是我心里很痛苦，而我不知道怎么制造快乐的因缘。那因为这样，我们就要以慈悲的心态去看待它，也不是去排斥它。那还有也学到说，愤怒会损坏我们的福报。那我们不要损坏福报的话，就要调伏愤怒。